Hi, my name is Judy and I'm the City Stitcher, and welcome to my Flosstube channel. Today is Sunday, July the 24th, and it is a beautiful day here in Alberta where I am. We've had a glorious weekend. It's been lovely actually most of the week. Little bit of rain last night, which was totally fine. A lovely sunshiny day today. Forecast rain tomorrow, which is great. I'm always, believe it or not, a fan of, having a bunch of sunshine in a number of days in a row and then rain, because drought conditions are not good for anybody. So little bit of sunshine, a little bit of rain, keep them in balance. My goal, because I'm in control of the weather, is not too much of either, but anyway, whatever. It's been lovely. It's totally Slurpee weather, so you know how excited that makes me. It's the little things in life. All right, this is a channel about cross-stitching and the stitching that I've done this week. If you're a new viewer, thank you for stopping by and spending some time with me. And if you like what you see, I look forward to seeing you again. And if you're a returning viewer, as always, thank you so much for watching this journey of mine. There's lots to talk about. This is going to be a long video. I say that at the beginning because I don't know how long it's going to be. When you clicked on the video, you'll see how bad it's going to be, but I already know that this is going to be a long one, so brace for impact. All right, questions. Suzanne commented on last week's that she sometimes uses a little bit of Elmer's glue on her light effects, because one of the things that the challenging things with any of the metallics, so whether it's Petite Treasure braid, Kreinik blending filament, Kreinik braid, or the light effects, is that it sort of starts to unwind and phrase at the end. So yes, it's an interesting comment. I'll think about whether I'm going to use it, because usually, we're going to talk about it a little bit more when I get into what I've used it on this week. Because one of my challenges is, like, I did see someone, they did one where so there's someone who uses sort of standard lengths of thread, and so she had taken one of her metallics and had sort of wound it around a card that sort of gets her to her thing, and then she used not Elmer's glue, but she used Fray Check, which is a stitching product, same thing, sort of, it's like stitching glue-ish, it's promoted as something like, so to help the ends of your fabric to keep from fraying, which I will say people in my family did use, including myself, before they became quilters and then had sergers in the home. Now that we have sergers in the home, we don't use the Fray Check because we just serge the ends of the fabric. So she sort of used her standard length and, used Fray Check and then sort of kept it together that way, because then the ends wouldn't fray as much, which is great. My problem is that I never use a standard length of thread for anything. So I'll think about it. For those of you that I enabled to buy an accessory tray, you're welcome. I'm really enjoying mine. So I'm enjoying it more than, when I talked about it last week, I was like, I was enjoying it at that point in time. I've clearly had it for another week. I'm really enjoying it. It's just that little bit of extra spot, a little more table space really to put things on, and as I'm doing things to keep things segregated, that fun stuff. Anyway, I'm really enjoying mine. So to those of you who've been enabled, I hope you enjoy yours as much as I'm enjoying mine. I did get a question about what magnifying floor lamp I use, so I looked it up. So I did, my first one I got from the Stitching Corner, which is a local needlework shop in Cochrane. I know that at some point Traditional Stitches did have these. I don't know if they currently have them in stock, but I'll look on their website, and if they've got a link to it, I will put a link to it in the notes section below. So my first one I got from the Stitching Corner. My second one I bought off of Amazon a number of years ago. 6, 7, 8, anyway, something like that. I don't think it's quite as much as 10, but it could be. So a number of years ago, somebody posted, and again, somewhere in social media land, Amazon Prime Day, on Amazon.com, so the US site, this particular light was on sale for $50, which was bargain, 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 bargain. And so I went, well, yeah, sure, it's going to be a bargain. So I looked on the Canadian site. It was not at a bargain price in Canada. I looked at it on the US site. It was still at the bargain price of $50. And I was like going, oh, shipping to Canada. Ugh. But the shipping was actually really reasonable. Like, I want to say it was maybe $20 US. You know, so not cheap, but not horrendous. And even with conversion, the deal on the light made it that it was way cheaper for me to get it from the US and ship it up to Canada. So that's what I did. I ordered it. So I have two. So I have one out here for the summer stitching area, and I have one inside for the winter stitching area, which I know not everybody has two stitching spots. I happen to be, have the luxury of having two stitching spots. So I have one at each spot. I've said to somebody, it's like, I'm thinking maybe I need another tray for the other one. I'm leaning towards no, though, at the moment. I think one is enough. Surprise, surprise. So it is a Daylight Natura Light LED floor lamp. I will put a link to it, whether it's from the Canadian site or whether it's from the US site, and check and see in the notes section below which one I've linked it to. But that's where, so one I got from the LNS. If Traditional Stitches has them on their website, I will put a link to that. I'll do my best to find it on Amazon on one of the sites, and I will put a link to that so you at least know what you're looking for. But that's the floor lights that I have and that I use constantly. And I've had them for years, and they work totally great for me. To Barbara, who said, my stitching is so professional. Thank you so much. That's the beauty of looking at it from a distance. It's not that it's horrible, but in the close-up in this week's topic, you'll see not necessarily a professional. But anyway, thank you so much for the compliment. It's lovely, and I'm glad that you think that it looks professional. Marcy, thank you for your comment on the fabric purchases, because you're going to have a really good chuckle this week, and you're going to have a really good chuckle next week, because there's going to be more fabric purchases in each of those episodes. Shannon made a comment on the video from 2 weeks ago when I was talking about the Victoria Sampler, and she commented that she was also working on the Heirloom Christmas and got stalled out on the tree. And the answer is yep. The tree can be a deterrent. My answer to you is make yourself finish it. Everything else becomes so much easier once you get past the tree. Just force yourself to get through the tree. And I can say that because I've done that. When I was taking the class, you know, because I'd sort of set up a goal for myself of when I wanted to be finished. Like the class was running, we were meeting once a month for the entire year. But I had set a goal for myself as to when I wanted to be finished it, so that I could take it in for framing and have it back in time so that I could have it hanging for Christmas. So I set a timeline for myself. And so one of the timeline that I'd set for myself is that by the end of January, the first month of us working on this piece, I needed to have that tree band done. I had to force myself, but I am so glad I made myself do that, because it's so easy to get stalled out on the tree. But if you just power through the tree, make yourself finish the tree, everything else is easier. Like after that, it's a piece of cake. It's very easy to get bogged down in the tree. Power through it. Power through it, because then it'll be fine. All right, and those are the comments. Thank you so much for all the comments on last week's video. That was great to see. Love getting the comments, because I really do feel like then we get to have a conversation. All right, from last week's video, the thing that I couldn't find, because of course I was looking for the wrong colored bag. It's in the red bag. Anyway, so all of the stuff for Frida's exclusive design with traditional stitches. So I actually did take this stuff with me for our stitching get-together that we had yesterday at the library, and showed all the ladies that were there. This, of course, is going to go badly. I can already tell, because, of course, it's the canvas, and I've got the canvas rolled up. And even unrolling it, it's not going to be great. But anyway, we'll see how well I do. So this is, I was going to check and see if that's actually what it called for. Vintage French Blue. Yes. I was going to say, I thought it was the called for fabric, but I had a memo. I was like, if it's the called for, just the one that I said I've got that's in my stash and I'm using it. So 18 count mono canvas in vintage French blue, which is what I've got. So this is actually the called for canvas. Let's see if I can get a little bit of a board. If you hear a big crash, it's because things have gone, you know, sideways. This will probably help. There we go. So it's one of those, sorry, sneeze. One of those printed canvas. So whether or not I do it with the print going this way or whether I do it with the print going this way is yet to be determined. I'll figure that out when I start stitching on it. I'm going to hold it this way because it's the rolls, or it's going to help with the roll problem. So I'm going to dump out all of the things and hopefully they're all going to land in my lap. Okay, so the 3 Caron watercolors. This is Monsoon. This is going to get interesting. Monsoon, South Pacific. Already it's looking fantastic. And Ink. On that side. I've got 2 skeins of DMC 3847, so I'm only going to hold up the one just so that I've got a better, you know, grip on things. Again, 1 skein of DMC Pearl Cotton in 597. The other ones I've got, because they came out of stash, are in ball, so that's going to make it a little more challenging. I'm going to hold them up briefly and then hold them up at the end. 930, 31, and 927. Oh, good. I had a moment where I was like, oh, you forgot to bring, and I didn't. It was in the bag. Huh. Mill Hill Beads, 081. A couple of Krynics. Number 4 braid is this one, and number 8 braid is this one. So this is the 11. I think this one is 29. Anyway, you can see how it goes with the colorway. I'm putting those down because those are spools, but really that's the color palette. Lovely, lovely, lovely. As I've said before, I have seen the stitched model of this. I love it, I love it, I love it. I've been waiting and waiting and waiting for this to be released, and I'm thrilled that it's out. It's fantastic. Love it, love it, love it. Okay, so that is the palette for Frida's exclusive with traditional stitches. I will put a link to that in the notes section below. Sorry, I just have to put everything back there because otherwise, you know, I'm going to have a problem. At least now I know what color of, you know, bag I'm looking for, which helps. Okay. So what did I stitch this week? Well, my finish this week is my Cottage of the Month. So it was finished at least a week before I need to start August. So that's great. At least I'm getting a break. These ones where I've delayed, it's like I really need to start at the beginning of the month and finish it. So I've got the rest of the month to do other things. Anyway, lessons learned, but all sorts of reasons why I got off track, but you know, all for good reason. So this is the July Cottage of the Month by Country Cottage Needleworks, which, as noted, Country Cottage Needleworks is from the US, so they've designed it for July 4th, essentially. So I've Canadianized my version. So my version is this. So this is done on 32 count Icelandic blue linen. So I have made the house, let's see, so there's what it theoretically was going to look like. So I've made the house more gray. It's actually a kind of a brownie gray. I used Gentle Arts aged pewter. Made the roof a dark gray, kept the white and the red in the house as called for. So the red and white flowers are as called for because that totally worked with my color palette. The light blue flowers, which really don't look like they're light blue, They look quite gray. They look quite gray in this light, but I promise you that they're a light blue. I used, I want to say Blue Beatrice for those. I took the called for DMC 744, lightened it up because, you know, yellow's not my favorite color. It's still yellow, but it's a lighter shade, made it 745, which I've tended to do. I made the letters, so the called for is blue because it ties in with their theme. Blue wasn't going to make my July work for me. And bizarrely, I didn't want to use red because I used red was the color that was used for June. Now, is there any reason why it bothered me that June and July would both have red lettering for the month? No, there's no sane reason why, but I didn't want it. So I did it in white. I thought it was going to be white with red outlining, but I did the first letter with just pure white and did the second letter with white, and I went, I think it wasn't enough. So I came back and outlined the first letter and went, yep, that's what I'm going with. So white for the letters with the same red that I've used everywhere else on this, which is DMC 347 for the outlining. I'm very happy with my Canadian flag. I think it turned out great because I stole my maple leaf from Jeannette Douglas. So I have clearly her Canadian Patriotic Sampler. I also have her Patriotic Snippets. And so the nice thing, and I'm going to help you out right now, that if you are wanting to do this and you were wanting to do it with the Canadian flag, if you happen to have Jeannette's Canadian Patriotic Sampler, I'm going to tell you exactly where I got my maple leaf. The maple leaf that is down here in the heart, which is the same maple leaf in this flag over here, are the correct size for putting it into the flag on this chart. I say the correct size with one slight modification. So my flag is one row longer than the called for in the chart. So I kept the placement at the top, underneath the top of the flagpole, exactly the same. I just added one more row, and you needed that one more row just to make sure that you had a border of white underneath the maple leaf. So it's technically, the flag here is one row longer than the chart, but that's very minor, very, very minor. So I've got three stitches of red, then this maple leaf directly from Jeannette Douglas's Canadian Patriotic Sampler, and then 3 stitches. So if you're looking for what to do to make the Canadian flag for this particular month, that's what I've done on mine. So if you like this, feel free to go ahead and steal that. Happy to help. And I ended up deciding to use because I forgot the number, E130. It's in my floss away bag, and I'm not taking it out. So I used the E130 for these fireworks, and I love, it's not going to show up as sparkly. I love how they came out because they came out very variegated. They are shiny, a little bit shiny, not horrendously blingy, but a little bit shiny in real life. And I loved the variegation. Loved, loved, loved it. So I didn't use the Krynic. I went with the light effects. And quite frankly, I loved how this came out. And I'm also keeping this, if I was working, I've got another chart, and you're going to see it in the Stash Acquisitions, where for what it is, there's a stained glass window. I'm not sure I love what they chose to use for the stained glass window. This is my solution to that. So if you've got a stained glass window and you need the variegated and something, this is now going to be my go-to for, you know, if you've got a stained glass and you don't want to do 47 different colors, because sometimes that's what designers do. They make the 27 colors. This is now going to end up being my default for stained glass windows in small projects. So I'm thrilled that I tried it out for these fireworks. Yeah, that's a little bit better. But this is now going to be my go-to for stained glass windows. So I'm glad that I tried it. Even when I use it for stained glass windows, it's probably gonna, you know, annoy me while I'm working on it, but I'm gonna love how it looks at the end. So yeah, there's my July cottage, all Canadianized. Yes, and again, hopefully that's gonna be the screen grab. All right, so that's my finish for this week. I technically have another finish. It's a chart finish, not a piece finish. So for those of you who've been watching for some time will know exactly what I'm talking about. This is my sampler of stitches, which is a series of 9 charts by the Drawn Thread, which I am doing as a Sal with Sarah the Stitchin' Mommy. So that's what it looks like all together. And again, the goal of this Sal is that if you get 1 letter done every 2 weeks, by the end of the year, the entire piece is going to be finished. So I am technically a little bit ahead of schedule. So I did take this to the stitching get together, so you're going to get to see it in all of its glory because it came off the scroll rods for traveling. So my finish is I finished MN and O. Now I didn't have a lot left to do on the O, I just had to finish this owl. So I used that Soie d'Alger, which was, I want to say 1743, 1745. Anyway, it's the 1 shade lighter than my dark taupe that I've been using for this. And my gold, so my owl is finished. And then I moved on to P, which is all of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 specialty stitches there. Now, I need to look at this because I know when I was stitching it, I was like, don't forget you're going to need to make a comment about something. So I did enjoy this one. This is the Persian cross stitch, so that was nice with the Soie Perlee. Ah yeah, it's this one, which is the Pekingese stitch. The green, the dark green in here is 1 strand of Soie d'Alger. In hindsight, I would probably have used 2, because by the time you do the wraparound, I mean, it shows up when you look at it up close. I think if I had used 2 that, you know, when you stand back from it, that line would have looked a little stronger. So if I were doing it again, just so you know, I'm not ripping it out and redoing it. So for those of you that are, you know, smart enough to, you know, be behind on the Sal, thoughts for you to consider, do what's best for you. I would have used 2 strands of the silk to make the horizontal lines. You're using 2 strands of the yellow to do the wrapping around. So I just think using 2 strands for the backstitched horizontal lines would have made it stand out a little bit better. So it's okay. I mean, it looks fine. Like I say, it's not worth taking out and restitching, that's for sure. I just think I probably would have used 2. Yeah, that was the one. So I'm about halfway through this, so I've got 4 more specialty stitches and then the letter P. So this one is actually a little bit bigger than M. Q is quite minimal. Like Q will only come to about halfway through N. So the P is very large, the R is very large, and not surprisingly the Q is small because there's not a ton of stitches that start with the letter Q, just like words in the English language. Anyway, so it is going to take me the full 2 weeks to get the letter P done. I can probably get Q done in 1 week, so at that point I will check and see where I am in terms of my schedule. But I think I was looking at it while I was working on it. The calendar, of course, is on the far end and it's too far to go. I think I'm a full 2 weeks ahead of schedule, which is great because that gives me a little bit of room to potentially fall behind at some point and still be on track for getting this finished in the current year. So there is my sampler of stitches so far. And again, this is just, it tells you how far we are through the year, right? Because take this, that's all I have left to get done. So PQR and then one more row and it's going to be complete. So I will say this concept of stitching an alphabet chart. So again, I'm only spending 1 day a week on it, except for that 1 week where I had to catch up and I think I spent probably 2, maybe 3. Okay, and skipping the one where I had to completely restart because I wanted to change my fabric. So other than those, 1 day a week is easily keeping this in check for me, keeping it up to date. So that's great. So Sarah, thank you so much for coming up with this as a SAL, because quite frankly, in the 5-year stitching plan, this probably would have not made it into the next 5 years if it hadn't been for that SAL. So it was an add to the 5-year plan, and it's gonna, I think it's gonna get completed this year. So I'm very, very happy with how this is coming along. So Sarah, thank you for coming up with the idea. As you know, I went, me, I'm gonna join it too. So it's great. Loving how this is coming along. So that is my sampler of stitches. So my finish was the MN&O chart. So of the 9 charts, 5 of the charts are now complete. I only have 4 left to go. Just for a close-up, this is the PQR. So I said I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 done. I need to do this one, this one, this one, that one, and then the cross-stitched P, and that's going to be complete. I will say right now, the instructions for this one are a little befuddling to me, so I am going to have to think about that. Anyway, I'm going to have to think about it and look at my pictures from the Craft Connection and see what I want to do. Anyway, so there is my sampler of stitches. Which brings me to White Christmas, which is the subject of the topic for this week, which is cutting threads for pulled work and hardanger. So this is White Christmas by the Victoria Sampler. I am stitching this on a 28 count teal Quaker cloth. I will say again, so this is a very old fabric from my stash. So I don't even know if it is available. I don't think it looks terribly tealy. I think it looks greeny, which is why I'm using it for this one. So here's where I'm at. So what have I, see, actually I like that because I have the debate about whether or not it looks like a village. I had one, I was like, oh no, that looks like a village. And one of you commented that it looks like a village. So what did I get accomplished this week? Well, step number 1 is I found my Medici wool so I could do my knit stitch here. This is another where I need to cut the threads, but if you watch the video at the topic at the end, you'll know why these are not currently cut. I will tell you right now, the answer is I am going to do them over 6. So I just need to do the math about what I'm going to do about where my placement is going to be, and then I'm probably going to try and do that tonight. Just because while you're on a cut work roll, I'm going to get it cut before I forget what I'm doing. So then I did my Smyrnas. They call this the Holbein stitch. Really, it's just kind of a double running stitch. Now, I started this band here. There's 5 of these things. They call them, I think they call them holly. Yeah. They call them holly leaves. I'm not sure that anybody would necessarily instinctively look at this and go, that's a holly leaf, but fine, whatever. So I did the first one and then just went, it's going to take me too long to do the 5, and I need to get down here to get all of this outer work stitched so that I could do the video for this week for the topic of cutting the threads. So I did 1 so I could come down to this bottom one because it's a lot easier to count down 2 stitches from that than it is to count for the whole way down. 2 or 3, whatever the number is. Anyway, so that I could start working on all of these. I'm going to hold that up close. So cross stitches, Algerian eyelets, and satin stitches. because you have to do all of that. All of that has to be complete before you can start doing the cutting of the threads for the modified hard hanger that's going to go in here, which again is going to form this bottom band. So I did that as well as when I did the cutting. So I did this band up here. So the white spots that you see in there, that is the board beneath. Right, so the green is the fabric which I've pulled together for that hem stitching band. So band 1 is now complete. Yeah, so band 1 is now complete. Now don't forget, I've got to add the beads into various, like there's a huge amount of French knots and beads left to go. So this band is nowhere near complete. There's a lot left to go on this. And I've got to add beads in, you know, in this band. I've clearly got to cut this one, but I'm now at a spot where I can, well, I'm going to finish from here down and then work back and start doing the beading. I don't think there's much beading at the top, and that's why I'm going to sort of work my way up. This is going to be a huge amount of beading in here, so check back later what my real decision is. Anyway, so I'm pleased with my progress, got all of this done, and you're going to get to see me cut all of the threads to, again, clip this, put my hand right, because that's where all that white space is where I have cut the threads and removed them to do the modified hard hanger at the bottom of this piece. So yeah, I think it's coming along. See, when I look at that, I go, yeah, village. Anyway. Okay, well, I'm on this topic also because I got to the bottom of this and I've now said this is what I'm stitching, because remember I had a fat quarter of this particular fabric and I hadn't cut it because I wanted, in case I change my mind, I've now decided I'm clearly using this for this piece. So I did cut it off and serged my ends because the fraying was starting to drive me nuts. So I have, this is how much I have left of the piece. I'm probably going to serge this piece before it goes back into my stash. So I'm going to remeasure what I've got, make it a note in my X-Stitch app, which reminds me, Shar, you had made a comment. Let me know in another comment if you need me to talk about what I keep in my X-Stitch app, or if I covered it very quickly in a video a couple of weeks, several videos ago. If you need more information, just throw a comment down below and more than happy to talk about X-Stitch because that's where I keep track of my inventory. So serge, remeasure. So right now in my X-Stitch app, it probably still says that it's a fat quarter. It's not a fat quarter, so I just need to go in and update the measurements that I've got for that. The other thing, so that was cutting off the bottom, but it left me, I cut it down to size, so I really am only having the 3 inches on either side, which left me this little piece of fabric. Now, as far as I'm concerned, this is not big enough because my tape measure is on the far side. So I'd say this is less than 3 inches wide. And so my plan for this, and I talked about this earlier, is that I want to start keeping fabric sample cards. So all I'm planning on doing is using regular recipe cards. Don't get the fancy ones because you're going to cover it up with fabric. So I'm going to cut this off so that I have a good chunk sitting on the front of the recipe card. I was looking for my recipe cards that I know that I have in my stash. Couldn't find them, so check back. I want to show you the completed one. So I want to keep a good chunk of it, label it as 28 count Teal Quaker Cloth. I'm probably going to make a note on the back saying it's old, like it's probably late 90s, early 2000s. And then the line, so I'm going to put this on the plain side. I'm going to staple it onto the card. And then one of the reasons why I'm totally comfortable stapling is because the staples aren't going to rust where I live, because where I live, it's very dry. We do not have a humidity issue generally, so I'm not worried about stapling it on. So I'm going to staple mine onto the recipe cards. make a note of what it is, and then on the reverse, using the line side of the recipe card, I'm going to say what projects I've used it for. So I will note that I've used this for White Christmas by the Victoria Sampler. Now, as I don't know where I put the other piece. There it is. It shouldn't be that hard. Right, so I still know I have another piece. So there is another piece left to go that I can use for something. This is not as big as what I used for White Christmas, so there isn't enough to do two white. Well, maybe there actually is. Close. Anyway, whatever. I'm probably planning on using this for something else, and so then what I can do is I can keep track sort of on the back of things that I have stitched where I've actually used that fabric, in case you sort of go, what does this look like when it's stitched up? So hopefully, if I do my job correctly, next week I'll be able to show you what my recipe card looks like. But again, that's what I'm planning on using this chunk for, is just for my own library of fabrics. Now, with hand over dyes change over time. Every hand dyed batch is different. Doesn't necessarily mean for the hand dyes that when I sort of start doing those as well that it's going to be exact. But again, the reason why I want to have a good chunk of it on the recipe card is, you know, because if you get something like this on a hand dyed, that doesn't tell you anything, right? So I want to have a good chunk. It's still not going to give you exactly what it's going to look like on a bigger piece, depending on the number of colors and the modeling and all that kind of stuff. But it's going to give you a starting point, and by keeping track of the projects that I've used on the back, it'll give you, again, it will give me a better indication of like, oh, right, I used it for blah, blah, blah. So if I want to go see what that looks like. Again, keeping in mind for any hand-dyed fabric that I use that dyes change over time, etc., etc. Even with things that are standard, like the fabric that I'm using for Ann Morrison, you know, you can still, whatever that linen is that I'm using, that color name is still in Zweigart's current fabric list that you can buy. But I can assure you that the color version I've got versus the current version are very different. So even though it's going to be a starting point, it's not going to be gospel. Things change over time, particularly dyes, but it at least will give me a starting point. So that's what I'm planning on using with my leftovers now that I've cut it down to size, and there it is. And I conveniently wore a dress today that coordinated with my White Christmas, and if you believe that that's actually why I chose that dress for today, I'm sorry, but that really isn't. Anyway, so that's White Christmas, coming along. I don't want to jinx myself. Let's see if I can't get it finished by the end of the month. I have a week. Can I do it? I don't know. And then the next project that I worked on, and I really do need to post this on Instagram because my Instagram posting has been terrible. So this is what I took with me to the Stitching Get Together at the library. I have not booked the library for our next one, so I'll announce that on next week's video. So I took my StitchCon exclusive by Sue Hillis, now that I've decided it needs to be finished in 2022. Now, everything that you'll see here is not what I got accomplished while I was there. I can assure you of that. I only got a fraction of this. Sorry, I'm just finding a board again. Because when you go and you stitch together, you talk and you do things, and I brought show and tell things, and anyway. But when I came home, I did a bunch more because I had kind of said to myself I wanted to get, when I pulled it out, I need to keep making chunks of progress. So when I started it, I sort of got all of this top chunk done and a bit of the heart. So when I pulled it out for this, I said before I put it away, because it's going away again for a bit, the goal is to still get it finished in 2022. This is not a hurry up and finish sale. This is, it got started and I want it finished by the end of the year. So before I put it down again, I wanted to make sure that I got sort of this chunk here. Again, this is not heavy stitching, But, right, if I got that chunk done, then if I get this done, then if I get this done, then I get the house done, it's going to get finished by the end of the year, right? So that's what I got accomplished. I did a good, I got Friends stitched while I was there. I got the top part. So both Friends and Sharing are done with 2 different colors of DMC, and I got one of the DMC colors done in Sharing, finished it at home. This is just back stitched, filled in the heart, did the back stitching there. I might be pulling my needle out and restitching that. Not sure I'm thrilled with it, but it's not enough for me to pull it out yet, but I think there's probably a good chance I'm going to pull it out and restitch it. Not, it looks like it's a little bent in the middle, so I need to fix that. Anyway, this needle's fine. That needle may get fixed. But again, progress is progress, and again, with the goal being that I want this completed by the end of 2022, I need to make the progress. So was happy with how that progressed, so that's great. It's going down because the focus is going to be on White Christmas, but that's what I worked on at the get-together. So those are the pieces that I've worked on this week. Let's get into stash acquisitions. All right, it's a big pile. So Stoney Creek had a Memorial Day sale. Stoney Creek's shipping is expensive. It's particularly expensive coming up to Canada, but there were a number of things that I had been looking on the site that I kind of went, I want these. And with the Memorial Day sale and a couple of other things, and a friend and I sort of combined some items so that we could split up the shipping, it ended up being a more substantial order than I thought. But at that point, we sort of hit a level of shipping and we added to it until we didn't hit the next category of shipping. So it ended up being, you know, more things. So there's quite a pile here. All of this came from the StoneyCreek.com website, and I'll talk about them, why they came there as we're going through them. Okay, I'm going to start off with, I got myself some Madeira silk. This is navy blue. It's going to be hard to tell. I'm not taking it, but it is navy blue. I got 4 packets. They were on sale. This cost me $2 US. I went, that's going to be a lovely navy for some project, and at $2 for a navy blue, you can't do any better than that. Okay. These are SJ Designs pearls in very specific sizes, 2mm and 3mm. The 2mm gold 2mm silver ones are specifically for that long band sampler from last year's magazine, the 2021 series of 4 magazines called Ecclesiastes 3:1, which is technically incorrect because it's more than Ecclesiastes 3 verse 1. It's several of the verses. Anyway, but they call it Ecclesiastes 3:1. It's that a time for all seasons. These are the silver beads that are called for that particular design. The 3mm gold ones, again, are for a Stoney Creek project, which I want to do at some point. And since I was ordering from Stoney Creek, I just bought them because they were there. I went, fine, add to cart. Stoney Creek has started having their own over-dyed cotton threads. And I had talked to the ladies out at the Stitching Corner one time when I was out there, and I said, what do we think about them? You know, because they clearly weren't stocking them. So if you are in Canada and you're wanting to order these, you can phone the Stitching Corner. I will put their information down below, and they can order them in for you. They aren't carrying them as a regular item, but they can bring them in for you. I don't think Traditional Stitches can bring them in. I haven't checked with Embroidery Marketplace, but I know that the Stitching Corner, if you ask them, they will bring them in. So they did have a customer who had asked for a number of they're calling them Creek colors, brought in. And so they brought them in for that particular customer. They brought what in the customer asked for. They didn't keep any extras. you know, what their take was this like, I'm not sure that they were necessarily that distinctive. And certainly the specific colors that they brought in for that particular customer, they were like, they're not really that over dyed. They really, to them, came out as more of a solid as opposed to a variegated. So they kind of went, you know, again, the ones that they brought in, they were like, this does not inspire us to, you know, add them as a regular item to the flosses that we're keeping in stock. But while I was ordering from Stoney Creek, and again, this is for a specific Christmas project, I went, you know, they called for a red. It was their Creek colors. So I bought the 2 skeins and went, we'll see how it works out. So this is, now again, it's more variegated in real life. There is a dark and a light. I took this to the stitching get together at the library, and so there were several people who said, you know, they thought it was a really nice red. I have not gone into my stash to see what it really is equivalent to, and certainly before I start using it, that is my goal, to say, is there a close equivalent in one of the other variegated cottons? You know, because certainly Stoney Creek does not give you a conversion. I don't even think they give you a conversion to DMC in their charts. But I don't know that I look at this and I go like, oh, that is so distinctive that I feel that on a go forward basis, do I need to get the Stitching Corner to order in the Creek colors in this particular color, which is cranberry? I don't know about that. You know, it was nice to see. I think it's a nice red. I'll certainly use it when I get to stitching that particular Stoney Creek design. I'm not sure what year that's going to be. I'm going to have them in stash and I'll use them for that. But again, before I start using them, I'm probably going to see if there's something else that isn't more readily available in the local needlework shops that I've got. But I've got it. All right, while I was doing weird things, they did a series of ornaments that they put into tart tins. I'm pretty sure that this was on clearance because I don't think I would have paid regular price for this, which means I probably got a good deal. So this is the finishing kit for that particular set of ornaments. So it comes with all of the tarts. It comes with the board to put the ornament on and the batting. I read through the instructions when it arrived. I think these are not the correct instructions for this, but I'm pretty sure I can figure it out. Anyway, so I got those while they were there, and they didn't change the shipping, which was actually one of the critical factors to that. I ordered some specific, again, these are for clearly winter Christmas charts that they have. They had some specific charms that they were selling as a set. So I added those. This is, so this is banding that has been discontinued by Zweigart. This is, I think it's 7 7/8 inch wide, outer to outer. So you need to, your stitching area is less than that because you need to come in from here. This was on clearance. So it was $5 US for 18 inches. I already had some of this in my stash because I do have some old designs, which they're in the 5-year stitching plan. This used to, so this is the burgundy one. It also came in navy with the gold edging. It came in a dark green with the gold edging. It came in white with the gold edging, and it came in a navy with a navy sort of, this is called pyramid design. So it's just navy on navy, tone on tone. Now, when I originally bought, so I have some of all of those, not surprisingly, in my stash. But particularly the ones with the gold edging, as far as I know, all of that has been discontinued by Zweigart. You can get it, you can get this, I'm going to just call it 8-inch banding with the pyramid design. Tone on tone in white and natural is still available. I don't believe that the navy is still available. But as far as I know, all of the ones with the gold edging has been discontinued by Zweigart, so hence not surprisingly why it's on clearance. Stoney Creek only had it available in the burgundy, because trust me, if they'd had it in the navy and the green, I would have bought more. Anyway, so both I and my friend wanted some, we sort of added an odd number of 18-inch lengths and then cut it in half. So I've got that added. Do I have a specific project in mind for this as of yet? No. But I'm pretty sure I will be able over time to find something that will look lovely on this. So I wanted to get it while it was still available. I got it in a length. The reason why we got the odd number and cut it in half is I had looked at a number of long sort of samplers that I had and sort of what that typical length was. I think this is 27 count linen, and generally the length that I needed was 40 inches, which is why we took an odd number and cut it in half. So we each have enough to do something that's, I think it's at least 40. It might have even taken us to 42 or maybe 44. Anyway, we have enough to do at least sort of what my typical long band sampler was that I had in patterns that I had in my stash with this. So I'm grateful to add that into the stash. No immediate plans for it, but again, if it's been discontinued, I've now got it in my stash. I didn't, as usual, didn't check just before I got on here to see if it was still available. But if it is, it's in their clearance section, and $5 is a steal for 18 inches of that. Now, the funny thing is when I placed the Memorial Day sale, which was back in May, I had not yet been to Traditional Stitches, and you know, I was having a hard time finding 32 count Summer Sky Jobelin, and I was going, I really feel like I need more. So, and interestingly, so they did have some in stock. I could only get it in wide eighths. I couldn't get a fat quarter. It had already been cut. So I got 2 wide eighths, and I was okay with the wide eighths because I'm thinking that for some of the Nora Corbett fairies, particularly the flower ones, I'm using 32 count Summer Sky Jobelin for Sweet Pea. Throw in a couple more. They will all fit on a wide eighth, no problem. And I just went, okay, so there are 2 more Nora Corbett flower fairies. And then Sweet Pea, and they'll all go together. Doesn't mean I won't change the colors for some of the other ones, but at least, you know, have a few that are all done on Summer Sky and a few in other ones. Wouldn't that make a lovely wall display? 20 years from now, I might have a wall display. That's not the point. So I got a couple more white eights. So now I'm at the point where I feel like I'm comfortable with the amount of 32 count Summer Sky Jobelin that I have in my stash. I am no longer looking for it. I think I'm good for a bit. So I picked up, so this is 32 count Vintage Rose. Again, I got a fat quarter. So think of Zweigart Luganas. I don't know if this also comes in a linen. I know that when I was ordering from Stoney Creek, Traditional Stitches did not have this listed on their website. So I don't know if it's a new color or just one that Traditional wasn't carrying. So Vintage Country Mocha is the printed one from Zweigart that is most well known because it's sort of the default if you're looking for an over-dyed brownie fabric for antique samplery things and you need fabric right away and the hand dyed's hard to get. Vintage Country Mocha is usually sort of like the default. Go ahead and use Vintage Country Mocha. It's brown, so I don't have any of that in my stash. I have Vintage Stormy Night, which has a gray tone to it. I have Vintage Atlantic, which is a more turquoisey, you know, all sort of with this this printed design, just in different colors. And so I wanted to add Vintage Rose to my collection. So I got a fat quarter of that. No specific plans for it. I actually quite like the color. So no specific plans for it, but I saw it and I wanted it and wanted to add it to the stash. This one, okay, let's do the easy one. Navy Lugana, which I know I can get here, but between the thingy and just sort of topping up the shipping, I got more navy. I do have plans for what I'm doing with Navy Lugana in 28 count. I wish it came in 32. It does not come in 32, so I'm getting it in the 28. But I have plans for this, which is why I've got it. And then this one is, so similar to the same way that Stoney Creek is dyeing their own cotton fibers, they also have their own hand-dyed fabrics. This one's going to come out of the bag so I can show you. So I got it. It's called Ghostly. It's a 28 count Lugana. Do they say Evenweave? Anyway, I'm going to say it's Evenweave, not necessarily anyway, whatever. I'm going to haul it out of the bag because, again, I took these to show the ladies at the stitching, and they were like, is it mottled? And it's very, very, yeah, very, very slightly mottled. So that sort of light to dark that you can see on the screen is the mottling. That's not just weird light reflections. So it's a very lightly mottled. So for me, I'm fine with lightly mottled. I go Halloween. Halloween pieces will look great on this. Now, one of the other things that was driving this, two other things. It's like, don't forget the other ones. I'm going to pull those out so I don't forget them. Actually, let's start with these. So one of the things that kicked off that I'd been looking at the Stoney Creek website and went, I can't justify the shipping just to get these things. So it had to turn into a bigger order. Hence, waited for a big sale, blah, 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 combined with a friend, then the shipping was okay. So they've had a couple of patterns in their magazines that I've liked. But they were placed into these boxes. Now, the boxes are very reasonably priced. Very reasonably priced. I think each of the boxes I'm about to show you is probably less than $10 US, which as far as I'm concerned is a very reasonably priced box. Because I live in Canada, the shipping was the problem. So yeah, anyway, bit the bullet because I just want them and get it now. So these are boxes from Jim Holtz. And again, so these are very specifically for some designs that Stoney Creek has in their magazines. So there's this one. I'm pretty sure there's a Christmas design that fits in here. I will try to go back and find the magazines that have the ones and put a link to it in the notes below so you can see why I was getting these. So I got this one. And I got this one. Now that I know that they're Jim Holtz, I don't know, I suppose I could go to Amazon shopping or look at other things that carry Jim Holtz products to see if they can bring them in without getting egregiously. But those are the two boxes. This is what started the problem, where I was like, I want these. I want the boxes. This is even before I went to StitchCon. Anyway, so that's really what was driving the primary decision, where I was like, I just need to get an order in. And then as I was topping things up, it sort of, got a little bit bigger. So the other thing, and I pointed this out, I think anyway, recently, there was a music design, and it comes stitched on, you can get it's a square of the Afghan fabric for the design. But it's already made up into the pillow cushion. The colors on the back go with my thing. So I wanted to do this for my music room. I was like, fine, I'm going to get this. With the sale, it wasn't that bad. Now, because it's already pre-finished, it does make the stitching a little bit complicated. This is where I'm going, this is the land of hoopville, because I'm going to have to fuss around with stitching, sort of put the smallest of the hoops on here and stitching around. So it's going to be annoying to stitch on, but it's pre-finished, which for me is a not great fully finished person. There is a benefit to getting this. It will annoy me while I'm stitching it, but it will be good at the end because at least I'll have a finished product. So I clearly just bought the pre-finished item. I did not buy the pillow insert. because I didn't need that shipping. It's really just a 9x9 pillow. I'll solve that problem. The 9x9 pillows are actually harder to find in Canada than you would think. So if any of you viewers out there are in Canada, hopefully close to where I am in Alberta, here's where you should go to get a 9x9 pillow insert, please let me know in the comments down below. Worst case scenario, like I say, I've got some relatives that are snowbirds. I could always, you know, come up with a winter visit to them and have it shipped to them and bring it back myself. Anyway, so 9x9 is the pillow insert size. So I got the music one. I got one, now this is where it got disappointing. So there was a fall one on the website, which I really liked. It's because it was purple. There is a design that I want to use, again, from the magazine, but this is not purple. So cautionary note, if you are looking at any of the pre-finished pillow things that Stoney Creek has on their site, the backing fabric to that pre-finished item, what you see on the website is not necessarily what you're going to get. Now, at this point in time, it wasn't worth sort of arranging, returning, and blah, 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 blah. I will be very clear that nowhere on their site for these items does it say that the backing fabric may or may not be what you see on the particular item. That's a problem for me. So cautionary note, if you look at any of their pre-finished item and you're like, okay, that's the backing that I want, I would say you're probably better off calling in to place that order to see what backing fabric it actually is going to be. Now, this is not devastating. It's not as nice as the one that I had seen online. It's okay. Theoretically, the point of this is going to be what's stitched on this, not what the back looks like. So it'll be fine. And again, this is just a small thing that I can throw somewhere, etc. Gotten specifically for one design that was in a previous magazine. These ones, again, so they've got a number of these that are Christmas. They've got Christmas designs that also fit on these. And again, so there's a number of different backing fabrics that you're going to see on the site. I specifically chose one because I was like, out of the options that were shown and all that kind of stuff, I was like, this is the backing fabric I wanted. And it was lovely, and I was really looking forward to it. This is the backing fabric I got. Now, this is not horrible backing fabric. This is not the backing fabric I thought I was going to get. Now, it's not horrible. It's fine. And again, the point is supposed to be what's on this, not what this is. The backing fabric that you're going to see on, certainly the one that I was choosing from, had a really lovely poinsettia pattern on the back, which is why I was like going, that's going to be lovely. So this is, I will say this is disappointing. Not enough to go through the hassle of returning and shipping back and blah, blah. Shipping back internationally is going to probably be at least half of what I paid for the shipping to get it here. So I'm keeping it. And again, I remind myself the point is supposed to be this, not this. But just so you know, if you're buying any of the pre-finished items on the Stoney Creek website that have fabric, if you care about what that fabric is, I would phone into them to place that order so you can confirm that, because this is definitively not what I thought I was going to get. So disappointing, not worth the hassle to send back, but disappointing. So I'm very disappointed. So I've got a big caution flag. I'm not sure that, now, I think I've bulked up on all of the pre-finished items that I would get off the Stoney Creek website, but it certainly will make me very hesitant to do another order with them for pre-finished items. Now, if this you're going like, I think that's great, that's fantastic, you can go ahead. Well, actually, even then, I would say phone to place your order, because by the time you get it, it may not be this. It could be some other backing fabric. Who knows? Anyway. It's okay. Disappointing, but okay. I got 3 of them because there are 3 very specific designs in the Stoney Creek magazine that I wanted these for. pre-finished, I've got a better shot of actually having it as a fully finished object if I buy the pre-finished item to stitch it on than if I have to turn it into a pillow all by my very self, because you've seen exactly how many pillows I've done. And then the last item, again, this was out of clearance, is Landmarks Around the World. I specifically got it for Notre Dame. I have a thing about Notre Dame Cathedral. I think it particularly has to do with the fact that in my travels, I did actually, I was part of a choir that went to Europe and toured Europe and sang, and we did sing in Notre Dame Cathedral. So I have a thing about Notre Dame Cathedral because I have sung in Notre Dame Cathedral. I've actually played the organ in Notre Dame Cathedral. That's a whole other long story because that was an experience. You'd sort of think an organ is an organ is an organ. It's a very different experience playing the organ in Notre Dame Cathedral for a choir. Long story. Let me know in the comments if you want me to tell that story. I'm not adding it to this one because it's going to add on to a very long one. This is the one that I was talking about saying, because I know that these are stained glass windows. Now, they're using one rainbow gallery fiber, I don't know what number it is, to do these. I don't know that I've got that one. I'm not sure I'm going to go looking for it, because now my solution is I'm going to use that Light Effects E130 that I used for the fireworks. I'm going to use that to do my stained glass windows in this. Now, I think I paid maybe $3 US for this. It's on clearance. I don't know if it's still going to be there. I like this one. This is why I got it. I would never have paid full price for this booklet just to get this one pattern, because it wasn't worth it. $3 for this booklet is totally fine for me. So I get Notre Dame. I don't mind the Eiffel Tower. I clearly have to fix the colors in the sky. Big Ben isn't bad either, but I particularly got it for this. Like I say, I've got a thing for Notre Dame Cathedral. Why? Because I've sung there and I played the organ there, and it's a big memory for me. So anyway, so that's the stash acquisitions that I'm going to show this week, because this video is already going to be long. I did get another order that I had placed. It has arrived. We're going to deal with that stash acquisitioning next week, because now I want to turn it over to the topic, was to show you the video clips that I did while I was cutting those threads for White Christmas. I will say I've not pieced them together, so I don't know how well the video is. Note to all of you viewers, first of all, not a professional. Certainly don't have a professional video setup system to do nice things on. So until I actually start piecing this together, I don't know how well the video, exactly how good the video is going to be. It's going to be interesting. Some of it's going to be sped up, I think. Anyway, stay tuned. It's just going to add, there's probably going to be at least another half hour onto this. So I'm looking at my thing going like, so it's going to be well over an hour and a half for this video, which is why it's like, it's going to be a long one. Anyway, so here comes the insert on me cutting threads, and it's going to come in here. Okay, so this is my Victoria Sampler White Christmas, and what we're going to do in these, well, for me, it's going to be a series of videos. For you, it'll all look like it's pulled together. Is I'm actually going to show you what I'm doing when I'm cutting the threads for the pulled work sections, as well as the modified hard hanger section at the bottom. So if you recall, when I first started this, I wasn't 100% convinced that I had the right fabric choice. So I skipped band number 1, which was a pulled work section, and pulled work, cut work, I refer to them as if they're all the same. And continue down. So now what I'm doing is, so this is band 2, this first one here. So I need to go back up and do band 1. So normally what would happen, because the first band is a pulled work section, is you would normally sort of just come down 3 inches from the top of your piece of your fabric and start cutting. I'm actually going to do it the reverse, because I've started with band number 2, so I need to count up from that particular band to start my cutting. So what I'm going to do is, so what you're going to do for the pulled work section is you need to cut the threads in the center. So the center of my piece is here. So you're going to cut the threads in the center, because you're then going to unravel them to the edges of your piece. and what I need to do for this first band. So off to the side, I also have the chart and the instructions for what I'm cutting. You will always need both of these when you're doing these particular sections, just to make sure that you're cutting exactly what you need. And certainly when we get to the next section, there's some specific instructions about how far to unravel things. So again, it's not that hard. It makes people very, very nervous because they're going, oh my goodness, I'm cutting my fabric. I'm cutting my fabric. The answer is yes, you're cutting your fabric. Don't worry, it's going to be okay. So my first one, so for my first one, I'm going to count up actually two regular stitches, because that's the first thread that I'm going to start to cut. And the thing that you need to make certain of is that you are cutting, for this section, horizontal threads, not vertical threads. So you always just need to be aware of which way the threads are running. So certainly for this section, the ones that I want to cut are horizontal threads. The other thing I want to talk to you about is the scissors that I'm going to use for this. So the key for me is that you need scissors that are thin, pointy, and sharp. So I'm actually just going to, because of course I have more than one pair of scissors, and I'm just going to compare the two pairs that I've got handy here. Let's see, where am I? There we go. Yeah, there's my big hand. So there's the pair. This is the pair of scissors that I'm planning on using. Here's another pair of scissors that I have. So if you compare the tips, technically at the very, the tips are both pointy, but you can see from the particularly this angle, you can see the difference as to how skinny the scissors are. So for any of my pulled work or cut work, I always use these, the thinnest of the ones that I've got. I use these for other ones. So thin, sharp, and pointy is the key to cutting. Now, it's going to get interesting here to see if I can, this is where it's going to get interesting. I'm going to start to cut and see if I get it on camera. So I'm really just actually literally going to So I'm just highlighting for myself the very first, I'm actually just going to pull my needle over a little bit more, but I'm actually just highlighting for myself the very first thread that I want to cut. So I'm going to come under, I'm actually going to do a little more finickying here. Because really what I'm doing is I'm just giving it a little bit of pulling it out of shape to make it easier for me to cut. Sliding my scissors underneath, and this is where, so this is where you have to be careful because you're aiming for just the one thread. So hopefully you can see on camera that I've now got my scissors underneath the one thread. I'm going to make them perpendicular, really, because I'm aiming for center, and then I'm cutting. So in order to make the next ones easier, what I'm going to actually do is I'm now going to start to unravel the thread that I've just cut. Because what it's going to do is it's going to give me more cutting area to make it easier for me to right? So you can start to see the area that is freed up. I'm only gonna unravel it on one end, just because I don't need both. It's going to give me enough, and by unraveling only towards one end, it's going to keep the center for me. So my I'm going back to my instructions and going, my goal for this one is that I am cutting 6. So I've cut my first one. Here comes number 2, and again, moving them perpendicular and cutting. Even then, I'm still going to unravel it a bit. I'm having a moment saying, I think for the camera, I should probably unravel it a little bit more. Okay, so there's 2. Here comes 3. And I really do unravel each one as I go, just because I am trying to ensure that I'm only cutting the threads that I'm really aiming for. 3. Here comes 4. Five. And 6. So then, just to confirm, I'm over here going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have cut the 6 horizontal threads. My next task is to unravel them. In this particular band, I'm going to unravel them all the way to the very end of this particular, to the end of the design area. So I'm just going to go silent as I am unpicking these. Yes, I'm having a moment because, of course, the camera's in a totally different angle. Now this is where it gets interesting, because as you're getting closer to the edge of the design, you need to start paying attention to where exactly you're going to stop. So I'm going to take it out to there and say that I am now technically at the edge of my design. So when I go to unravel the next few, you know, the same way as when I started, it made it easier because I had a starting point. The same thing now that I've done the first one, the stopping point is going to be easier to see. But the method is the same for unraveling. Again, I'm just using sort of the needle that I've been using on this project to help me unravel the threads. And of course, it's taking longer because I'm on camera. So I'm going to pause the video now, and I'm going to unravel the threads in both directions to the end, and then come back and talk about the next step. Okay, for this last one, you'll see that I've changed the direction of my piece, which is, you know, as I've said before, I like to put my pieces through their gymnastics. I'm just going to highlight sort of what I'm doing here as I'm coming to the final leg of this one. Again, so I'm sort of coming, here's the edge of my piece. I'm just going to get these other ones out of the way. Going, here's the edge of my piece, and I'm going to come up to this very last thread and pull. That's sort of, as I'm going through, that's how I'm making my line and getting it there, so that when you get to the end, when you pull back, you'll see that you've got this nice sort of ending row here. And you'll see that on both of them. Whoops, there we go. Right, so now you can see all of the vertical threads that are intact, but again, sort of, you know, as you come to your edges, you'll see that you've got a very clean line coming up, sort of from your piece, saying there's the end of your design area. And now you've got all of these vertical threads that are left intact, which is where you're going to do the pulled work, sort of when you're using another thread to pull around it. So now what happens is, so that's great. You've cut your thread. You've now pulled them out to the edges of your design area. What do you do with these? So there's a couple of different options. You know, again, look at the instructions for the piece that you're working on. I've had pieces where you've actually been instructed to entirely remove on the other, sort of coming this way like every other one. So instead of just sort of ending at the design area, you would actually take every other one and remove it all the way to the edge, and then reweave the ones that you have left to fill in the spaces. In this particular design, it actually says not to do that. It actually just says to reweave what you've got in the spaces in between. So I'm going to start doing that, and you know, I've got two choices as always. So I can either decide I'm going to start doing it that way, and I'm going to decide if it's too bulky or not. And if I think it's too bulky, then I will probably remove every other one. Keep having to angle it. That's why it's on the white background, just so that you can see through the fabric. So yeah, I'm actually just going to take a second because I'm also going to get one other tool that I'm going to show you that I sometimes use when I do these. Okay, so the tool that I'm talking about is a star detailer, which is this little tool. Has a little star, and then really just this big wire, you know, threader thing. Do you need a star detailer when you're doing this type of work? Not necessarily. Have I used it? Yes, which is why I have it. Can you do your reweaving with just a regular needle? Absolutely. So I'm going to show you how I'm reweaving with using just the needle, and then I'm going to show you sort of so I'm going to show you one with reweaving with a regular needle. Then I'm going to sew in the next 4 threads, and then on the last thread I'm going to use the star detailer and show you how that works. So just hang on a second while I get myself set up. So this is not rocket science. You know, you're just weaving in a tail, sort of, you know, opposite the direction of where Okay, so for me, so what I do is I come back up where I'm going, okay, this is definitively the edge of my piece right here. I think this is going to be really hard to see on camera. Anyway. So I'm just going to come in and every other, you know, welcome to weaving, up and down in the reverse direction. So I'm really just filling in the spaces in between. Welcome to Weaving 101, over, under, over, under. It always is a little bit disconcerting for me when I'm using it on a more linen type cloth because you know I generally spend my life in the land of even weaves. So I have to think a little bit more when I'm reweaving on linens. So I've done a bunch. Now this is where, again, welcome to the gymnastics of Judy's piece, where I'm just going to come back and I'm just going to slowly pull this through. Let's see. Yeah, most of that was probably off camera. Slowly pull this through. There we go. Now, I've still got some left to go on this one, but the reason why I was going slowly on this very first one is because this is the one where I was going to decide if I reweave it in between, is it going to be too bulky or not? And the answer is no, I think it's right. So there we go. So there you can see where I've rewoven in one of the threads, and I think it's going to be just fine. So I'm going to use my needle and reweave the remaining 4, and then I'm going to come back and show you how I use the star detailer. Okay, so I've now rewoven in 5 of the 6 horizontal threads here. And so for this last one, I'm going to use my star detailer. So when you're using a needle to reweave in these ends, of course, you're going to start from here and you're going to work your way out. In this case, I also want to highlight the fact that my tails, which I have not cut off because I'm going to talk about that in just a second, are sitting on the back of my fabric. They're not on the front, they're on the back. With a star detailer, the interesting thing is that so unlike the needle method where you start here and you work your way out, with a star detailer, you start from the out and work your way in. So you usually sort of take the length that you're planning on reweaving in and sort of saying how far out. Now there's a certain length that, you know, that you're limited by the length of the star detailer itself. But, you know, the length that I'm reweaving in is, you know, longer than what this is. So I've got lots of room. I've also woven my star detailer in before I got here, because if I did that on camera, that's just bad for everybody. Sorry, I'm just adjusting my ends here. Okay, so I've woven it in, and so what happens is once you've woven it in, same thing, just over, under, over, under. You're going to take, this is where it's going to get messy on camera. You're going to take this end and you're going to, in this opening here between the 2 wires, you're just going to thread that through. And hopefully it will go through without too much trouble. Except that I'm doing it on camera, so it's probably going to be a pain in the neck. Come on. And worst case scenario, I take my needle threader, put it through the wires because I'm impatient. And just pull it through. Okay, there we go. So you're going to leave it so you've got a little bit of a tail, and what I do is I just tug it down to the very end, because there's like a tighter part at the end of this loop. So I just make sure it's there. And so then what do? Then you just pull it through. Now, as always, as I get to it being tight close to this very end, I just slow down a bit just so I make sure that I'm happy with how my edge is looking here. Sorry, and by then, so I'm over here. Now, technically what I want is I want this to be on the back. So I'm actually just going to force the star detailer down the very next spot, which of course I can't see while I'm doing it this way. Come on. I'm actually just going to pull it through. Oops. Well, that didn't work, which is totally fine because the needle will solve everything. And now I have, whoops, all my tails on the back. Now, it looks a little taut here with this last one, and that's true. And so what I do is I just give my fabric a little bit of a, quite frankly, here comes another technical term, a little bit of a wiggle, just to sort of straighten everything out. Now, it still looks like that section has been worked on, but again, as you sort of continue working on your piece, this will loosen up. It looks a little bit, as I say, it looks like it's been worked on. Why? Because it has been worked on. But that's where I am. That's where my edges are. And now that band is ready to go. So that's how the star detailer works. You know, can I say that I use one method more than the other? I probably use my needle more than I use my star detailer, only because from my perspective, I have to think harder when I have to weave in from the opposite end. Right? So that's all that is. But now that's ready for doing some hem stitching. Okay, the part where when everything's rewoven and you've got the tails on the ends. So a couple of things. When I reweave my ends in, I don't always necessarily take them to the exact same spot. Do I have any good justification for why that is? No. Is it what I do? Yes. So when I come to cut off my ends here, I don't cut them as close as I would normally do on other threads. So like when I'm reweaving thread ends in after I'm stitching, I tend to cut them fairly close. On these, I do tend to leave a little bit of extra room or remaining thread. I'm trying to get just one. Why? So if you can see there, so that's about how much I'm leaving. So I'm leaving just a little bit. I'm not cutting it as close as I would. And the reason why I'm doing that is because generally I find that if I cut it really, really close, that as I'm working on the piece and doing other things and pulling and whatever, it's moving the fabric enough that sometimes those ends pop out to the front. So I tend to leave a little bit more just to prevent those ends from popping through onto the front. So it's not huge tails, but I am leaving a little bit of a tail on each of these, which is why I'm coming into them sort of at an angle. Oops, there we go. Because that's what's sort of forcing me to sort of leave that tail. And as all things that are me, are all of the tail sizes exactly the same? Nope, because that would be weird. But I am leaving a bit of a tail each time. Okay, so this is what it looks like from the front. I'm just gonna pan back out a little bit here. Right, do my little wiggle wiggle. It'll be fine at the end, certainly, and once you finish working on the piece and you do a pressing, it'll be totally fine. So that's what it looks like from the front. This is what it looks like from the back. There's another hem stitching section in this piece that fits right in here. So I'm actually not going to cut those threads just yet, because one of the things that I need to do is this this particular band is, as far as I'm concerned, not centered. So I've been debating it as I've been working on the piece about whether or not I'm going to be okay with that being not centered. And of course, not surprisingly, the answer is no, I'm not going to be okay with it not being centered. So I just need to work back and sort of make my adjustments as to where I'm going to start and stop. And again, because I'm cutting threads, you know the saying, measure twice, cut once. My answer is make sure you're cutting in the right spot. Now, it's not too bad here, because you know, for this one, you're going to still start in a center spot. So I can always sort of cut in the center and count my threads out. The other interesting thing is the stitch diagram that goes with that particular band shows it being stitched where you're pulling 4 threads together. So the diagram says 4 threads. The instructions say 6, which is why it ends up being uneven. So I'm going to have to do, I'm actually going to use, before I go ahead and do what's really called for here, I'm going to do a little bit of a test stitch to see whether I like 4 threads pulled together or 6 threads, because that will drive how I'm going to choose to center this one. So I'm leaving that one for the moment till I get that one centered. Well, I decide how I'm going to get it centered correctly. Okay, which brings us down to the hardanger band. Now that we've moved down, so as you can tell, I found my white wool, so I got these bands finished. I did a little bit of this band just to make sure that I knew where I was ending up, so I could count down more easily, because there's a lot less stitches between here and here than if I had to count all the way down from here. So I did a little bit of this, but clearly, so there's 4 more of these that need to get stitched into this band. But then I spent my time working on getting all of this part done, because this is what's setting you up for what they're calling a modified hardanger band. Now, why do I think they're calling it modified hardanger? I'm not entirely clear. One of the differences compared to sort of what I call standard hardanger is that normally you would have these cluster blocks, which again, cluster block sounds fancy. It's just a series of satin stitches that sort of determine where you're going to be cutting your threads. Now, so at the ends here, these are typical of the satin stitches that would be the cluster blocks that you would see in standard hardanger. Above it, in the row above and below where this is going to be worked, technically these are not cluster blocks, but they are all satin stitches, and certainly this whole area has been filled in. And so when you're working on hardanger, you're cutting threads to the point where you're completely removing it. So unlike the pulled work or cut work from up here, where you've cut the threads and you've rewoven them in, when you're doing the cutting for hardanger, what you're really doing is you're cutting threads and completely removing them from the piece entirely, which is what's going to give you sort of these areas of absolutely no threads. And the reason why that doesn't, destabilize your piece is because you've got all of these satin stitches. So all of your, you know, wherever you're going to cut, once you get to the other end of that, there's a whole series of stitches which is holding the remaining thread together and will keep it from coming out on the other end. Okay. So as with everything else when you're doing cut work, the answer is follow the instructions, follow the instructions, follow the instructions. It's the cutting version of safety first, safety first, safety first. So when I'm coming through my instructions for this, you know, not surprisingly, it said work all of the cross stitches. Then I worked all of the Algerian eyelets, and then I put in all of these satin stitches around it, and the satin stitches here that are running horizontally. Now I have a little bit of a chuckle. It says straight up in the instructions that, you know, all of these satin stitches together will replace the more usual cluster blocks to hold the threads after they've been cut. And then it says in all caps, do not cut threads until all of the above stitches have been worked, which is absolutely true. If you start cutting, you know, so the critical part is that all of this has to be stitched before you start cutting when you're doing a form of heart hanger, because you need all of this stitching to stabilize all of the threads that you're going to end up cutting. Okay, so what normally happens when you're cutting heart hanger, cutting for heart hanger, is that you're cutting in a series of 4. So you're going to cut four threads. You're going to leave 4 threads. I'm actually just going to see how well I don't know how well this is going to come out on camera because I have to concentrate when I do this. Okay, there's a possibility I can pull this off. Okay. This way. Okay. Let's see how I go. So again, so what I'm cutting first is I'm cutting horizontal threads first. Now it says to start at the bottom, but I'm actually going to start almost in the top. So I'm actually starting 1 down from where I want. Going to be terrible. I can't see what I'm doing here. Hopefully, okay, I'm just going to go and hopefully this is going to show up on camera. So I'm actually, instead of cutting the first one, I'm cutting the second one because I think it's easier for me to get my scissors through. So again, I'm putting my scissors through. I'm actually going to reverse where they're going. So I'm going to make sure that where I'm cutting is closest to the threads, but not catching the threads, which is critical. So there's 1. Now I'm going to go up and do 2. Now, as with all things with me, I'm going to start to remove these because it's going to give me a more defined area for where I'm cutting. So I'm actually going to, you know, start pulling these threads out because it's just going to make it easier for me to cut the next threads. So more working room is better than less. So there's 2. Here comes 3. And here comes 4. Again, I'm just going to pull these threads out just for clarity. And I'm sure I have a friend who does a lot of hardanger, and I'm sure if she were watching this, she'd be killing herself laughing, because for her, cutting is so second nature that she'd be going, "You're an amateur," and the answer is, yep, I'm an amateur. All right, so there are my top 4. So then I'm going to skip 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and here is my next thread that I'm cutting. There's 1. And I'm going to remove it a little bit. Here comes 2. And I'm going to pull it out. Now, the instructions don't say anything about, you know, do one, you know, pull some out, do another one. So that's just how I approach it, because I like having the space. There's 3. I don't know, I think I do it for visual clarity. And last but not least, here comes 4. Now, do I really have to pull this one out? No. Am I going to do it anyway? Yes, just 'cause. So, what it does for me is that I'm just trying to make sure that I'm confirming that I've got 4 cut threads here at the top, 4 that are still intact, and I've cut another 4. And again, when you're working on hardanger, sorry, the papers are flying. You're cutting everything in sort of sets of 4. Okay, so I've cut on that side, and I do find that when I cut, I do better when I'm cutting heading towards my right. Why? Because I'm right-handed. So when I go to cut on the other end of this, you're going to cut the same set of threads. So what am I going to do? Well, we all know that Judy likes making her needlework do gymnastics, so we're going to completely turn it around so that as I'm cutting the threads on this side, I'm coming at it from the right. So in this case, you know, again, I'm finding the one where it's easiest for me to start cutting, and in this case, it's going to be number 3 over here. So there's my cut. Unstitch. Okay, the weird thing with my setup is I have no idea how much of this that you're actually getting on camera, because not surprisingly right now it's more important to me that I'm making sure that I'm cutting the right things. Okay, so there's horizontal thread number 1. So again, I've cut the first 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, so at least I know I'm starting in the right spot again. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because sometimes you can just take one of these ends and get the whole thing to come out. So there you go. There's one that's completely pulled out. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard. Once you get the first one, the remaining ones get easier. Again, because you've got more working area, right? So here comes the last one of these 4, easy to come out. There's 1, So again, as noted at the start, you know, the difference between hardanger and pulled work is that you're completely removing the threads. So I've now removed the horizontal threads, and again, so you can see that there are 4 horizontal threads that are still intact. And now I'm going to start cutting the vertical threads. So when I'm cutting the vertical threads, I, of course, read your instructions, read your instructions, read your instructions. Okay, so yeah. Okay. Nothing scintillating in the instructions, other than, you know, cut in sets of 4. Now, when you're cutting the vertical ones, these are a little bit easier because you've already removed some threads. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I didn't spend as much time thinking about these ones again because I've already removed some threads. My cutting area is fairly clean. So there's the first 4 cut. 1, 2, 3, 4. Alrighty. There we go. I've cut all my threads. Everything has worked out perfectly. Now, as usual, I'm giving my fabric a little wiggle waggle here. What it's doing is it's just sort of pulling some of those potential nubs that are sticking out. There's one here that I can see that I'll probably fuss with a little bit later. But generally, my little wiggle waggle pulls everything back in line so that you see hardly anything. Yeah, that one particular square, I've got one on both ends. But again, you can sort of fudge those when you're working on them, when you're doing the rest of the weaving of the ends. I'm actually just running over to get the picture so I can show you. So this okay, so now that I've got all of the cut work done for the hardanger section, you can see, so what I'm going to end up doing is sort of doing these woven bars with, what's the thing that's going in the center of them? Dove's eyes. Again, I'm not good with what the names of anything are. I just know how to do them. I followed the instructions. Right, so woven bars with dove's eyes in alternating as you're coming along here. Right, so you can see, you know, again, you've got completely open space in alternating blocks as part of this modified hardanger band. And on my piece, so you can see, you know, how this will end up working. Right, so this is going to end up being a completely open square. These are going to be used for the woven bands, open square, right? So this will be open, this will have a dove's eye, this will have a dove's eye, this will be open. But again, so I've done all of this cut work, I've removed all of the threads, and my piece is not falling apart, and it's not going to fall apart. Why? Because I have all of these stitches surrounding this area, which is stabilizing the fabric with a hilarious large amount of tiny small ends. I'm actually just going to bring them into focus because I think they're hilarious. Let's see how far they have to come. There we go. Yes. Right, so there's all of my, well, most of them anyway, all of these little ends of the parts that I've removed as part of making my modified hardanger band ready for work. So all the cut work is done for that. So that's good. Like I say, I'm going to have to come back and figure this one out. But yeah, so the cut work's done. It all worked out perfectly. I'm actually quite happy with how it's looking. And yeah, so, you know, again, the cutting is not necessarily hard. The cutting is with all things, you know, cutting can be a scary thing, but the answer is make sure you know where you're cutting from. And check, 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 and then cut. And with anything else, the more you do it, the more confident you become. So again, I'm laughing because I'm thinking of my friend who does pretty much all hard hanger. That's all of her. She doesn't really do as much cross stitch. She's predominantly a hard hanger stitcher. You know, so for her, watching me cut hard hanger would be hilarious because compared to her, I'm slow, 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 slow. Because she can just come in and go cut, 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 because she's done it for so long and has done so much of it. It's just second nature to her, you know, hence my, you know, count 4 out loud, sometimes in my head, but, you know, sometimes out loud. But again, what it does for me, yeah, I don't do it as much as her, and I would rather have it come out correctly than accidentally cut somewhere else. So, like I say, same thing, you know, safety first, safety first, safety first. Well, not so much safety, but, you know, let's just make sure we're doing it correctly. And I hope that was helpful. It will be interesting to see how these clips come together, because like I say, when I was doing some of the cutting, I wasn't paying attention to what it was looking like on camera, so who knows what it's going to look like. But with that, I'm going to turn you back to regularly scheduled programming. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. Like I say, given that I haven't watched all of the video clips myself, I recorded them all, but I didn't watch them back. Hopefully it turns into something that's helpful. Let me know in the comment section down below. But that is my journey through cutting the threads for that particular piece. And as I've said before, just make sure before you're cutting, check, 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 and then cut. Which reminds me, one of the things that I'm pretty sure I forgot to say, just in terms of density, because I'd made a comment earlier that I was going to decide whether I was going to pull the threads out. You know, if you look at it up really closely, you would see, because I've woven them in, it does look denser. And certainly, let's take it completely off. Like certainly, like when you can see through it, you can clearly tell the areas that I have rewoven the ends in, right? They're denser than the cloth around it. Now, when you go to frame this, so this is one of those ones where I was going to make the decision. It's interesting that a lot of the framing preferences these days is to frame right up to your stitching. I will tell you right now, unless it's full coverage, I generally don't like that. Because believe it or not, I get claustrophobic looking at a piece that's been framed right up to the stitching. Full coverage, absolutely. Right up to the stitching, no problems. Not full coverage, samplers framed right up the stitching, I feel like I can't breathe, which is weird. It has nothing to do with breathing. Anyway, so certainly, you know, for me and my preferences, I'm always going to leave some fabric visible around my design area. Now, this will probably just get mounted on white so that everything shows through all nice pretty, I think. Check back later. But I'm not worried about it in this because it's not dense enough where I'm going to go, you know, by the time you stretch this and you put a frame around it, that somebody's going to go, what's up with that section, right? It's visible when you do this. It's not visible, you know, it wasn't as visible even when putting it up against this, right? I would say, you know, there can be fabrics that you can use where it is going to be noticeable. And so I think those are the ones where, again, as I said in the clip before, so you'll see instructions where it says to remove the thread and reweave the ones that you've cut into those blank spots. You know, again, just to sort of help with that. But for this piece and this particular fabric, I'm fine with what I've done here. I'm going to do it one more time. Visible when you hold it up where you've rewoven those threads. not so visible as soon as you put it up against something. So again, so I'm fine with my decision about how I've rewoven those, and I'm happy with that. So yeah, so like I say, I hope that was helpful, because I don't really know, because I haven't watched all the clips. Let me know in the comments, maybe. If you go like, wow, that was really horrible and not helpful, maybe don't put that one down in the comments section. We'll just be quiet. Anyway, I'm going to end the video so it doesn't get any longer. I hope everybody's staying safe. Safety first, safety first, safety first. Safety first, safety first, safety first. I certainly know that one of the ladies who would have come to stitching, just her husband is fighting an infection right now, just went, I have to be ultra careful. I just don't want to, you know, go and meet with a group. That's totally fine for me. If I happen to bring a bug back, it like could take her husband down. That's right. Safety first, safety first, safety first, safety first. Hopefully she'll make it to the next one. So safety first. Did you hear that one? So I hope everybody's staying safe. I hope everybody's staying healthy. I hope you're all finding some time to do some stitching, and that your stitching is bringing you enjoyment, contentment, a relief, a change of pace, whatever it needs to be for you. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.